TFT is a game where you are constantly building on your previous decisions. Hence, having a strong early game knowledge is pivotal for success. How you play your stages 1 and 2 can often decide whether you will be fighting for placements or cruising towards the top 4. My name is Boris, and in this video I will provide a short guide on how to approach your openers. I will begin by shortly going over some basic fundamentals of openers that are evergreen and carry over from set to set. Then I will dedicate my focus primarily on the 1 cost units in set 14 Cyber City, as understanding your 1 cost is just as important as knowing your 4 and 5 costs. I'll look more into 2 and 3 costs in a separate video while I focus more on the mid game. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. First, let's talk about some general fundamentals of openers. And my first tip would be to always play around your pairs, especially the ones you find in stage 2, see what other units in your shop can fit well with this unit, because once you upgrade it, it's possibly going to be your biggest spike during the whole of stage 2. Now, once you have upgraded units, you definitely want to itemize them. Items on your bench are doing absolutely nothing, and in fact, you are paying with your HP for them sitting on your bench. Even an item slam that kills you 2 more units during stage 2, that's 2 HP that can sometimes be a whole 1 to 2 placement swing at the end of the game. Now, you should also be familiar with meta knowledge. You should know which items you should be building for your units to carry, for your in-game carries, and which lines you should be able to establish from the items you've made and units you've upgraded. Now, from the econ side of things, you should be very careful with holding pairs of 2 and 3 cost units, because quite often making that 2-star 2 cost or holding a pair of 3 cost or even the 3 cost in general is totally not worth it, especially if you're not making your first 10 gold. Holding a 3 cost and not making your first 10 gold is going to end up with this unit costing sometimes up to 12 or 13 gold just because you didn't make these econ intervals. So make sure you're making your econ intervals, especially if you are playing a comp that's fast aim. If you're following your reroll, fine, hold your pairs, upgrade your carries that you know you are chasing for 3 stars. Now, also, you should always be looking to save HP, and that's my take. There are very certain spots where you should be lose streaking. It would be in general to secure a specific item you need, or from a spot where you know you'll be able to bounce back. Like for example, a 2-cost reroll that's going to spike hard on stage 3. Now, during stage 2 you also have quite a lot of downtime, because you're not rolling down, you've made your items. You can use this time to position correctly and scout and see what lines are open and how to capitalize. Position for focus firing can again save you quite a lot of HP and net placements in the end. On the other side of things, you should scout and take time with your augment pick. Sometimes being the last person to make that augment pick can net you an uncontested line, even that comes at the cost of taking a little worse augment. You are saving a lot of gold from not going into a full 2 to 3 way contested line, just purely dedicating yourself that from the 2-1 augment pick. Hence, if you even watch someone at this show at Worlds level, he always picks the time, but make sure you budget at least few seconds to make your first round board, otherwise you've lost HP. And specifically for this set, early gold from hacked augments is insane. It comes back to the same thing as for 3 costs, you make your intervals early, and even the 2 gold that we have when I'm making this video, it can be broken. Dish Soap himself has said that even at 1 gold this can be completely unbalanced. Now, that we've covered the fundamentals, there's one more point, which would be to level on 2-1. I see a lot of people making this mistake of leveling on 2-1 unreasonably often, especially in prismatic party lobbies where they just toss their econ, or to 5 on 2-5. In general, you should look to meet 3 out of these 4 conditions: upgraded units, activated synergies, an item to slam, and a combat augment. If you meet 3 out of 4 of these, feel free to press that level up button, and if you get a successful 3 streak, go to 5. because you leveling, investing that gold, not making those intervals as early, can only be earned back from winning. If you end up leveling and lose streaking, you're in quite horrible spot because you're not gonna have the leak only to bounce back. Now, let's jump straight into the 1-cost carries of set 14, Cyber City. I will begin by talking about first the carries, and then I will do the tanks. For carries here, I will also display and mention some of great items for them. So let's begin with Kindred. Extremely popular in the Nitro line, but he is a great item carrier for your marksman and rapid fire units for the late game. However, he is an AD caster himself, so an item like Rageblade is not that great for him. He's actually very good at holding things like Shojin, IE, Last Whisper, Guardbreaker, which play into quite few 3-cost units like Draven and Jinx, or for example Xayah. However, the Rageblade is completely good. He does have 3 traits which Riot usually balances around, therefore he will fall off into stage 3 usually, unless he's quite fully itemized. At least that has been my experience, that in stage 3 he's not able to solo carry full. Now, the other rapid fire unit we have is Kog'Maw, and he is the guy you want for the Rageblade. That's his best item, and especially if you pair this together with Skarner Frontline, this is very strong, and he's been a little weak at the start of the set and he doesn't play as flexibly into later lines, but I could see this guy being great if Marksman Vanguard line becomes good again. However, Kindred is far more flexible, hence if you're playing something like Fast 8, I would recommend sticking to him. Now for the AP side of things, we first have Zyra. She operates similarly as she has done in previous sets, where she shoots out and stuns a little bit. And she plays very well into her late game carries. That would be someone like Brand for the Street Demon line, or she maybe even item hold for Ziggs. Straight up AP caster, sorcerer, techie, call it whatever. She upgraded Zyra, can always do work when she's been a 1-cost, and it's still the case here. And you can play her either in Street Demon or techie openers, or even as a additional carry in someone like Animal Line together with Seraphine, which would be the Adder caster. She is more AoE oriented, hence giving more that oomph into her with things like Shojin and Rabadons. Can pair together really well with some certain Anima Squad traits, for example. And again, she can be played in Anima openers, techie openers, or just paired along with Zyra on like something like a Street Demon board. Now, for the third AP carrier, we have Morgana. She's more designed to fit around her late game carrier, which would be Wex. Hence, she uses the blue buff very well. Other than that, it would be about the same itemization. She can also spread Morello really well, if you have that. But with Divinicore and Dynamo being a little weaker in the early game, well, I would say Dynamo is quite good, but Divinicore currently is not being that great. She falls back to the other 2 AP carries, and I feel like that's going to be the general case in the meta. Now, for melee side of things, we first have Shaco, the hyper-scaling carry, which scales on kills, and especially together with the hat can be an absolute menace in stage 2 if you have this guy upgraded with 1 or 2 items. However, he falls into this hyper carry spot where either he's very good and you're gonna scale around him and he's gonna do insane, or he's not gonna be that strong. And I feel like in this set the melee carries sadly fall off too much unless they are overbuffed. And also we do not have really late game melee carries apart from Zed. That would be at the 4-cost side. That would be the only 4-cost. And while he holds items great for him, you're sitting on this guy at 1 star until you get that Zed, and then you're transitioning directly to a 1-star 4-cost. rather than a 2-star 2 cost or 3-star 2-star 3 cost that you had before. So if you don't hit, you're in quite a lot of trouble playing around these Slayer lines. However, his reroll can perform really well, together also with the Syndicate. If you ever chase 7 Syndicate, he's great. And the last carry that we would say, which is the melee carry, would be the AP side. We have Nidalee. Again, fits really well into these Nitro openers where you can play the reroll version of her. Or if you somehow get 3 amp, which I don't think this opener is particularly great, but it's possible. She can also be played into amp openers together with Naafiri. Let's cover the tanks. And for tanks, I will not be generally showing items because you can be both more flexible with your tank items and melee items. And also, but these are the general good items I feel like to have in the early game. Stoneplate being the trickier one. On someone like Illaoi or upgraded Poppy, it can be great. However, I do not think this item transitions into late game like almost at all, which will be the second set in a row. But maybe we will find a way. Otherwise, effective HP and utility are the go-to things, in my opinion, in the early game, which are best represented through these items. First, we have Alistar. He is the more tankier of the two bruisers. However, his effectiveness, let's say, is directly tied to how good Golden Ox is. While 2 Golden Ox, at its current state in the early stages of the set, is possibly the most broken 2-piece trait ever printed, Graves has not recovered from his BB nerfs like almost at all, and he's not that great of an item carrier for your Aphelios for the later game, nor Annie at all. Hence, you would generally, he does not fit on that many boards as well, but he provides a stun, which can be quite valuable. And even tossing this guy on the board as a 2-star can sometimes be quite strong. Now, the other guy, which would be the Mundo, I think he's the better of the 2 bruisers. Usually when you have 3 traits, you suffer stat losses. Currently, that's not the case with Mundo, and he has the thing that I mentioned with the items, which would be effective health. He has healing through his ability, and if you have him upgraded, this guy can actually be a menace with like a couple of items in stage 2 while being unkillable and dealing solid damage to accompany your backline carry. From Bastions, we first have Jax, which in my opinion is the stronger Bastion, not only due to the current popularity of Exotech, it's simply Exotech yielding items. Hence, if you have this guy upgraded with already slammed an item, you give this guy a second item, and with some items, like I think it's Chassis, that scales with the shield, this guy can go unkillable. And yeah, you can play him in Exotech or Nitro openers or any kind of pair with any kind of Bastion you find from the 2-cost side, and he's always going to be effective, especially when upgraded, in my opinion. Now, Poppy is a little trickier because she is tied to the Cyber Boss. She can be very strong, and I've seen her even carry some melee carry items for Rengar, for example, quite well. However, I do think Jax is simply stronger at providing the tankiness you need. If you need some more damage, Poppy can be the way to go. However, I think you really do want the Cyber Boss activated for her, or the backline carry, to gain the full potential out of this unit. And from the third frontline we have Vi, tied to the Econ trait, so this unit is always going to be extremely high value in the early game to hold on to. Especially when these cash out traits are very strong, like it is currently, and generally tends to be if you play in lobbies where any edge matters. Other than that, you compare her with any other Vanguard. However, due to her being tied to the Econ trait, her base stats are actually slightly higher than Sylas's. Hence, I give first hand usually to Vi, and Sylas is more, I would want to say damage oriented, but he plays into this Anima Squad trait of ramping. An anime squad wants to stay alive and keep killing units, and he fits into this very well. However, if your board has not upgraded carry or anything that would kill, this guy loses some of his effectiveness. Therefore, I prefer Vi. And for the last part, I've prepared a little, you could tell this a tier list. I've essentially ranked between two distinguishing units, which in my opinion are the stronger ones. And here what you would see on S tier is what units in my opinion you should be playing around in the early game over the ones in the A tier. And as I went through my explanations of these units, I think Mundo is simply a better tank and more flexible than Alistar. I think Jax provides you with more tankiness than Poppy. I feel like Zyra is better at killing units and being able to save you HP than Seraphine, as she relies on your board being able to ramp and having tempo. I prefer Kindred over Kog'Maw due to his flexibility, but having both rapid fire and marksman traits, as well as Nitro being a quite flexible trait to play around when you have the extra frontline from the D-Hex. I prefer Vi as a tank over Sylas due to her having bigger base stats and Sylas having the same fate of Seraphine, of them wanting to be played from tempo spots where you can capitalize on killing units on the board. Now, I've placed Morgana on S tier, however, she has started that she has been weak, but the Vex comp is rising currently as we speak, and if Vex is strong and Morgana is balanced, I think she can be very strong even with the Shojin rather than the blue buff, and we might see a niche cases of reroll of her, similar as we saw evolve towards the end of the last set. Now, I have both melee carries in A tier because I simply do not think the transitioning is really... I'm not even sure what you would transition Nidalee into, to be fair, if you make fully melee items on her. And Shaco transitions into only Zed, hence you have to play into Zed if you're casting items on him. And I just do not see these units with melee carries this set being as effective as they were in some of the last sets. And there we have it. Now you are more prepared to tackle your early game and set yourself up for success in the late game. I provided you some general fundamentals of early game that you can carry over from set to set, such as playing around your early pairs, slamming items to save HP, and not committing to lose streak by playing around your strongest board, while still prioritizing strong econ. As well as I've given a deeper dive into the 1-cost units of set 14 Cyber City, which items they can carry well for your in-game carries and what units to pair with them. I would like to thank you for watching, and you can learn more about how to play around the Anima Squad opener online in this video. Have a good one.